Hello and welcome. This is Michele Christensen of OneNote Worthy Life, and in this video I'm going to be talking about a question that I get asked really often, and that is, how do I get started with OneNote? I'm filming this in OneNote for Windows 10, so if your screen looks a little bit different than mine, it might be because you're using a different device or version of OneNote. So the question of how to get started in OneNote can take many forms. Somebody might say, I've downloaded the software, now what? Somebody else might say, how do I create a planner in OneNote? Somebody might say, how do I learn OneNote? So if you're new to OneNote and you aren't sure where to get started, let me assure you that you are not alone. Although this question comes in many forms, I can tell you for certain that a lot of people have this question when they first start using OneNote or want to start using it. So let me just tell you a little bit about how the outline for this video is going to go. I'm going to start with showing you how to install and get started with OneNote. Then I'm going to give you some tips, and then I'm going to be talking about whether you're converting an old system or starting fresh with OneNote. So for the most part in this video, I'm going to be talking about getting started with OneNote for the purposes of personal organization. However, if your goal with using OneNote is to create something for a specific purpose, such as a recipe book, a travel journal, a household binder, a workout journal, anything like that, most of this information would apply as well. Just know that you're going to start that project rather than a personal organization project. So let's get started with the install. So the first thing is you have to install the software. So I'm sure you probably can tell that would be your first step. You'll find the installation link in the description of this video, but it's pretty simple, onenote.com. You'll find all the different versions of OneNote on that site. And in case you didn't know, OneNote works on Mac and PC desktops as well as iOS and Android mobile devices. And you can even access your account online from any device connected to the internet. So the second point here is I recommend that you can start by installing OneNote on any of your devices, but I recommend that you start with the device you use most frequently. For example, I use my home desktop machine most of all, so that's the first place I would install OneNote if I were starting today. Now, in short order, you're probably going to want to put OneNote on all of your mobile devices and any other machines you use, so you can take advantage of how OneNote syncs across devices. But whatever device you use most is going to be the device you're most familiar with, so you have that to your advantage as you're learning a new piece of software. So the third point here is that you need to create a user account with an email address and a password. Before installing OneNote, you might want to check that you don't already have a Microsoft account associated with the email address that you want to use. So if you have a OneDrive account, a Microsoft Office account, a Microsoft Teams account, or even a Skype or Xbox account, you might already have a Microsoft account associated with the email address you want to use. So if you do find that email address is already in use by Microsoft, you can go through the password recovery process if you need to, and then continue on, or you can use a totally different email address to start fresh with OneNote. Now for the last point on this page, if you're using a desktop PC, you're in the unique position of having two versions of OneNote to choose from. As of the day I'm recording this, you can use either OneNote 2016 or OneNote for Windows 10. There is a history there, and there's a reason that you have two versions, but we don't need to get into that in this video just to get you started. If you're curious, I'll link to a video I did recently on the version update, but it's not necessary to know this in order to get started. So I recommend starting with OneNote for Windows 10. OneNote 2016 is the older version, but it's still very useful, and we do have some time to use that still. And in fact, both versions are useful because they each have features that the other lacks. Once you're comfortable using OneNote, you can actually install both and run both on your machine and switch back and forth. But I do recommend that you get started with OneNote for Windows 10 since that is the newer version. So once you've installed OneNote, you should have a shortcut on your screen or in your Windows or Apps menu. And I'm going to show you what that looks like for me. So this is a screenshot of when I click the little Windows button on my computer, which is down here where this lower arrow is pointing to. That's the Windows button. And when I click that, this is what pops up. and this is where I get to OneNote. Now for me, it's one of my most used, so it's up here in the top under most used, but if it doesn't pop up there for you, you could scroll down to the O's, like you can see this is in alphabetical order, or just start typing OneNote and it should come up. So click that shortcut or this icon in your apps menu, and it should open you up to your account, and you will have a new notebook with a single notebook and a single page. And so I'm going to show you what that might look like. So here we are in, I'm calling it New Michelle's Notebook, and it has one section and one page in that section, and it's blank. Your first notebook will probably be called by your first name with an apostrophe S and then notebook. So my first notebook was called Michelle's Notebook, and if your name was Mickey Mouse, your notebook would probably be called Mickey's Notebook. So for this demo, I've called the notebook New Michelle's Notebook to make it as similar as possible, but not to get it confused with the actual original notebook I had. So now that you have your account set up and you're looking at your first notebook, it is a good time to talk about how your OneNote account is organized. So on this screen, I have kind of a hierarchy of how your account is set up. So on the very top, you have your OneNote account. And then within your account, you have notebooks. And you can have a lot of notebooks. I don't know if there's actually an upper limit or not. I know I have 30 some, but you can have a lot. Within notebooks, you have sections, and then within sections, you have pages. And the best comparison I've ever seen would be something like a 3-ring binder that you might use in a school or office setting for documentation, where there's sections and then the pages can be moved from section to section. So that pretty closely, I think, resembles the structure of OneNote. And just for completeness, there are 2 additional organization layers. You can make section groups, and you can also make subpages. But again, this is just a getting started video, so I'm only mentioning that so that you have heard of it. So we're almost ready to actually get started using OneNote, but there's one more thing I want to mention before we start, and that is where you choose to store your data and if you have a choice. So generally, most user data is going to be stored on OneDrive, which is Microsoft's cloud storage. However, there's a few exceptions, such as older versions that allow for local storage, like on your C drive or your hard drive, and you also have, in some cases, the ability to export a copy of a notebook to a local drive as a backup. So this is all the detail we need to cover on storage locations for a getting started video, but I wanted to make sure you knew to look for this and to not accidentally store something in the wrong place. I recommend you start with cloud storage only to keep things simple. If you're worried about having sensitive information on Microsoft's cloud, then I would say don't store that sensitive information in OneNote until you get a solid handle on the software, and then you can make a decision about your sensitive data at that point. So I do recommend starting with OneDrive as opposed to using your local drive or a combination. So we're just about ready to begin using OneNote, but I want to give you some tips first. So my first tip is to start simply. Just write down some things you need for today on the first blank page in your notebook. Repeat this tomorrow and the next day and the next day until you have a sense of what you need on a daily page. At that point, you may want to consider creating a daily page that you can copy and reuse that has all the elements you want, or you might not. So I'm going to show you kind of how that might look by going back to this new notebook I created. So if I was just kind of using this bullet journal style and just making notes as my day passes, I might have something like a new phone case, need bananas, almond milk. And then I'm just going to go over to my other notebook, and I have some sample content, just so that we don't have to watch me type. So I'm just going to paste that in. But normally you would just be adding notes and typing all day as you go. So yeah, this is how I would start. Just start really simply. Write down the things you need. Write down notes as they pop into your head, that kind of thing. Now, as the days pass, you can continue to work on this page. You can just add more to it as you need to, or you could add a new page. So let me just show you how to do that real quick. Again, in OneNote for Windows 10, this column here that says Friday, April 24th, that's my page list. This section only has one page, so there's only one page in it. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of this and click Add Page, and we'll call this Saturday, April 25th. So if you wanted to start a fresh page for the next day, you would do that. If you want to use signifiers from the bullet journal system, I have a video on that as well, which I can link in the description. And as you work through the items that you've written down, a simple way to handle it would be to use a strike through to show that something's been handled. So let's say I ordered my new phone case. I would highlight this and go up to this, which is the font formatting, and click the strike through. So now just really easily I can see that that's been handled. And then of course there's many other ways to work. You could use tags, but that's kind of more of an advanced thing. You could highlight things as they're done. Whatever works. There's no right or wrong way. I'm just trying to show you some simple ways to get started. Okay, so tip number 2 is that unlike some other note-taking software, OneNote does not require you to add a PDF or any kind of image to write or type on top of. You saw that when I added my daily items to that sample page. Once you have that page in front of you in OneNote, you can write, type, paste, whatever, right on top of that page within OneNote. Of course, you can add a PDF to OneNote and write on top of it, and I'll link a video showing you that in this description. I just wanted to be clear that you don't need to, and you don't need the skill of inserting a PDF to get started. So tip number 3 is I encourage you to start using OneNote and then just learn the features as you need them. So for example, if you need to highlight something, learn the highlight feature. When you're ready for a new page, you can learn how to add a new page, although we did go through that. It's just much easier, I think, to learn something when you have a need for it and can use it right away. I don't recommend that you try and learn the software thoroughly before beginning to use it. And just to demonstrate why I say this, I'm going to tell you a quick story from the Learn OneNote conference. This was an online conference for OneNote fans to learn more about using the software. It took place from 2016 to 2018 online, and in one of those years, I'm pretty sure it was 2017, there was a member of the OneNote team presenting at the conference, and she relayed a story of how her favorite moments at work were when she asked a user what their favorite feature of OneNote was, and they named something that she didn't know the software could do. So the point of this story is to tell you that OneNote does a lot of stuff, and it's actually one of my favorite things about this particular software is that you can continue to learn more and more about it for a long time. So there's so much it does that I think it would be overwhelming to try and learn all of it or even a significant part of it off the bat. I think it's way more manageable just to start using it and then learn as you go. So tip number 4 is to ask for help if you get stuck. There are a lot of OneNote users, and there's a lot of really smart people. So if you get stuck on something, chances are there's someone out there that can help you. And I just want to give you a few suggestions of where to go for help. These will all be linked in the comments or in the description. So first of all, there is the help function within OneNote. To access that, I'm just going to go to my upper right here. It's the fifth icon from the right, and it looks like a light bulb. This is the help function, and you can just search in there for what you need, and that might get you your answer. You can also come to this very channel you're watching, and you can also ask me questions via the comments, or I also have a contact form on my website. I love answering your questions and interacting with you around this because a lot of times I get ideas for videos, so it's really a win-win. So you can reach out to me, you can check my channel, ask me questions. I also host 2 Facebook communities, the OneNote Bullet Journal group and the OneNote for iPad group, and both of them have really helpful, really experienced users that are very generous with their time and their information. And then the final place you might want to go is the Microsoft forums. They have some user forums with a lot of great answers for your questions. So if you get stuck, do ask for help. So tip number 5 is that try not to be too afraid of making mistakes. For some people that are used to paper journals or notebook, there's a fear of getting started because they don't want to mess up a page and be stuck with it. So OneNote is really forgiving in terms of being able to rearrange and edit your pages and information many times over. So if you try something and you don't like it, you can usually revise it, move it, copy it over and start fresh. There's a lot of options for fixing things. So try not to be too afraid of making mistakes or to let that keep you from getting started. So tip number 6 is something I like to call the rule of 3, which is that you might want to create a collection for something once you have more than 3 of them on your page. So for example, as you're going through your daily page and just logging all the things that you need to write down as you would in the bullet journal system, if you notice that there are 3 books that you want to read, you could actually grab those 3 items and put them on a new page to create a list or a collection, as it would be called in the bullet journal system. You don't need to, but I find that 3 is a good number because once you have 3 of something, it's kind of like you have the start of a list of things. And then you have a list of books that you want to read instead of having these random little things sprinkled out in your general data. So finally, my last tip to get started is to use OneDrive to start. As I mentioned, you do have some options for storing locally, but I recommend that you store in OneDrive to start just because everything will be in one place, it'll all be stored and saved for you, and it will also sync across your devices. If your data is sensitive, consider that before using OneDrive or any cloud service for that matter. So the last thing I want to talk about is converting your old system versus starting fresh with OneNote. So if you have a planning and organization system, or what I like to call a life management system that's working for you, you may want to replicate it in OneNote. For example, if you're using a paper system, you could literally map each page of your paper system over to a new page in OneNote, and then use basically the same system you're using on paper, but have some of the advantages of digital, such as the ability to copy and paste things rather than rewrite, and you also have the ability to link pages together. The same goes for you if you're using another digital note tool. If you have a system that works for you, consider trying to recreate it in OneNote rather than reinventing the wheel. Kind of the second point is if you don't have any sort of existing system, your approach might be a little bit different. And so in this, I'm picturing someone who doesn't really have a calendar or any sort of to-do list or running notebook or any sort of reference documents or things that they need to do or that kind of thing. So if this is the case, one of the first things you might need to do is some sort of a brain sweep, which is often called a brain dump or a brain download. But the idea is to get everything out of your head and onto your digital paper in OneNote. The nice thing about doing this is that it puts everything in writing and all in one place. And once everything's out of your head and onto your digital page, you can begin to prioritize things. You can group like things together in a list or collection, and then separate things that are just for reference and don't need action. But the point is, once you get it onto that digital page, you can start working with it and visualizing it and putting things together and figuring out what order you're going to tackle these things in. So my third point here is that OneNote may not be able to replace all of your digital tools. I actually use a digital to-do list called Remember the Milk and Google Calendar as well as OneNote. The important thing about using multiple tools is that they all have very specific and different functions so that I don't ever get confused about what goes where. You might find that you can replace several of your digital tools with OneNote, but just make sure that you know what goes where and that you don't create a system that's so complex that it requires maintenance of its own. Now, I get asked a lot why I don't use or switch to Microsoft tools for my to-do list and calendar. And the answer is that I was using both of these tools before I ever got into OneNote and Microsoft tools. And what I'm using today works just fine, so I just don't see a reason to do the switch. If I was starting today, I probably would try and use Microsoft for my needs outside of OneNote just because of the way everything communicates and can work together and that kind of thing. So to summarize the answer to this question of how to get started in OneNote, I would say to start very simply and write down some things you need right now and for today, and then just keep going from there. Learn features as you need or want them, and pay attention to what you wish you had written down or what you wrote down but don't really need on that page, or then consider adding new sections or even notebooks as you need them in order to keep your information organized. So I hope this video was helpful and that you feel ready to start using OneNote. If you have any other tips that I didn't cover or something that you think would help other people get started, please add those to the comments so that we can all share and help everybody out. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the thumbs up button, and I would love it if you'd subscribe by hitting the subscribe button. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye!